U.S. Navy ambushes $7 billion drug ship in the Caribbean, but the ocean turns into a war zone. September 27, 2025, under the cover of darkness in the Caribbean, the United States launched a direct attack on the operations of two of the world's most dangerous drug cartels, Venezuelan Tren de Aragua and Mexican Sinaloa. They were disguised as a merchant ship, but inside they were loaded with 40 tons of drugs, 10 tons of fentanyl, 15 tons of methamphetamine, and 15 tons of cocaine. On American streets, the drugs would be worth more than $7 billion, enough poison to devastate entire American cities. On board were nearly 40 cartel gunmen armed with AK-103 rifles, RPK light machine guns, and Glock sidearms. Even more horrifying, 5 hostages, women and children, were taken to be sold into global human trafficking networks. But the ocean betrayed them. 10 U.S. Navy RHIBs carrying 60 sailors armed with M4A1 carbines, 48 Malawian Quachas machine guns, and M110 sniper rifles closed in. Overhead, an MH-60S Seahawk circled, its GAU-21 heavy machine gun trained on the smugglers. Will the U.S. Special Forces successfully disrupt this deal, or will they escape into the darkness? Let me show you the truth now. At exactly 3:10 a.m. on September 27, 2025, the surface of the Caribbean Sea appeared calm, but below, a storm was brewing. Out there, 120 nautical miles southeast of Puerto Rico, 2 cargo ships slowly met in the darkness at a trading post located in the middle of the ocean. One belonged to the Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan-origin criminal organization that had transformed itself from street thugs into a multinational terror machine sailing from the south. The other, sailing from the west, represented the Sinaloa cartel, Mexico's most notorious drug empire. This was no ordinary encounter. This was the largest drug deal ever made on the high seas, and it had been planned for a long time. Inside the steel hold of the Tren de Aragua was a deadly cargo, 40 tons of drugs, 10 tons of fentanyl, enough to produce 5 billion lethal doses, 15 tons of methamphetamine, the crystalline mass gleaming in the dim headlights, and 15 tons of pure Colombian cocaine packed so tightly that it looked like bricks stacked floor to ceiling. In total, the cargo had a street value of more than $7 billion, enough to poison entire cities across America. On deck, between 10 and 20 armed enforcers from each cartel paced nervously, their fingers curled around AK-103 rifles, RPK light machine guns, and Glock sidearms. They were not amateurs, they were soldiers of crime bound together by greed and brutality. Their goal was simple: exchange billions in cash for narcotics, then disperse the poison northward into America's veins. For years, Tren de Aragua and Sinaloa had tested alliances in secret. Tonight was different. For the first time, they had chosen the wide open sea, disguising their ships as ordinary merchant carriers. No streets, no borders, no police patrols, only black waves and the illusion of safety. To them, it was the perfect plan. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't imagine, was that American eyes were already on them. From satellites in orbit, from drones circling at altitude, and from the quiet signals of intercepted communications, the United States had been watching every move. And as the first bundles of narcotics were dragged onto the deck, a counter-operation already set in motion the day before was tightening like a noose. The night had only just begun. As the 2 cartel vessels drifted closer on that black Caribbean night, they believed the ocean itself was their shield. What they could not see was that a far greater force was already in motion. For 48 hours, U.S. naval intelligence had tracked every encrypted message, every satellite ping, and every unusual maneuver on the water. The pieces all pointed to this moment, a multi-billion-dollar narcotics handoff at sea. The stakes were staggering. If the exchange succeeded, 40 tons of poison, enough to flood the American market for months, would move north under Sinaloa's vast smuggling corridors. Analysts in Washington estimated it could fuel over 15 million individual street deals. Each one a spark of addiction. Each one a potential death. For the United States, allowing it to slip through was unthinkable. The plan to intercept was laid with precision. From the deck of the San Antonio-class LPD-17, a literal combat ship stationed 10 nautical miles away, orders crackled across encrypted channels. 10 RHIBs, rigid hull inflatable boats, slid silently into the sea, each carrying 5 to 6 Navy sailors and special operators armed with M4A1 carbines, 48 Malawian Quachas machine guns, and M110 sniper rifles mounted for overwatch. In total, nearly 60 men were converging on the target from all sides. Above, an MH-60S Seahawk helicopter hovered 600 feet, its powerful searchlights ready to burn the darkness into daylight. Gunners manned GAU 21.50 caliber machine guns while forward observers relayed every movement to the approaching RHIBs. The trap was not brute force alone. It was timing, coordination, and the discipline of men trained for moments exactly like this. Every RHIB throttled down just outside the kill zone, drifting silently as sailors checked magazines and adjusted optics. Radios hissed only 3 words: hold the line. On the cartel ship, the first crates of narcotics were being lifted, cash bundles stacked beside them. On the horizon, the faint whine of rotors began to grow. What Trinidad and Sinaloa thought was a safe haven was now a cage, and the American fist was about to close. What do you think? Could the U.S. Navy stop and destroy this entire billion-dollar drug trade right at sea? Comment below. 3:28 a.m. The silence shattered. From above, the MH-60S Seahawk dropped its searchlight onto the deck, a blazing cone of white that stripped away the cartel's camouflage. A voice boomed through loudspeakers: U.S. Navy. Lay down your weapons. Surrender immediately. For one heartbeat, Trinidad gunmen froze in disbelief. Then defiance snapped back. The first muzzle flash ripped across the darkness, a burst from a mounted Dishike heavy machine gun tore into the air, its 600 rounds per minute rattling the Seahawk's fuselage below. Sinaloa shooters leveled their AK-47s and RPK light machine guns, spraying blindly at shadows. The sea, calm only moments before, now churned with the thunder of gunfire. The Americans responded accurately. 10 helicopters landed at 40 knots, their 48 Malawian Quachas machine guns firing. Sparks flew over the black waves, cutting through cartel fighters scrambling for cover inside the ship. Navy snipers armed with M110 rifles picked off their targets ruthlessly, one shot, one to the deck. The battle was chaos, yet perfectly orchestrated. Within the first 5 minutes, over 1,200 rounds were fired from U.S. weapons. Sparks danced across the hull of the narco ship as bullets punched through metal plating. One cartel gunman with an RPG-7 managed to shoulder his launcher and fire. The rocket screamed past a RHIB, missing by only 15 feet before detonating harmlessly in the sea. The shockwave sprayed walls of water over the sailors but left them undeterred. From above, the Seahawk's GAU 21.50 caliber roared. A single strafing burst shredded the cartel's machine gun nest, cutting down 3 fighters instantly and silencing the Dishike. Still, the traffickers fought with desperation. Grenades clattered across the deck. A sailor aboard a RHIB was wounded by shrapnel but continued to fire, blood streaming down his arm. The intensity of the fire reached its peak at 3:41. Smoke billowed from the drug ship as flames caught the cargo net, small explosions shaking the night like war drums. More than a dozen cartel gunmen fell, their bodies scattered among the billions of dollars worth of drugs. Surrounded, their ammunition dwindling, panic spread. Some tried to reload with trembling hands. Others screamed into radios for help that would never come. The Americans pressed harder, closing the circle. Each RHIB drew closer, muzzle steady, while the Seahawk above traced every movement with unblinking eyes. The ambush had begun as a demand for surrender. Now it was a storm of fire and steel, and the narco soldiers of Trinidad and Sinaloa were being crushed beneath it. 3:52 a.m. The cartel ship was burning in patches, the deck slick with salt water and blood. The gunfire had died down. The Trinidad and Sinaloa fighters, out of ammunition and courage, dropped their guns and raised their hands. As soon as the first man knelt, the command rang out clearly: "Boarding team, go from the sea." U.S. Navy RHIB slammed into the steel hull. Hooks flew, ladders clanged, and within seconds, 2 full boarding teams, nearly 30 sailors and crew, were swarming onto either side of the ship. Rubber boots thumped on the deck, rifles pointed, lasers cut through the smoke. The cartel fighters were pushed face down onto the steel, their wrists strapped. In less than 7 minutes, more than 25 drug fighters were captured. What they found below deck was worse than expected. In the forward hold were the drugs, 40 tons in all, pallets wrapped in film stacked on top of each other. But the shock was not just the drugs. In a locked cargo cabin, the sailors broke through a reinforced door and discovered 5 hostages, 3 women and 2 children, chained and terrified. They had been sold into human trafficking networks, their lives turned into commodities. The rescue was immediate. Medical staff wrapped them in blankets, checked their wounds, and carried them out into the crisp night air. One child clung so tightly to his sailor's uniform that he refused to let go, even when placed on a RHIB. As the evidence was gathered, a final decision was made up the chain of command. The drug ship, too damaged and too dangerous to tow, would not be spared. Explosives were placed along the hull. The sailors returned to the RHIB. Minutes later, flames erupted as controlled explosions ripped through the ship. The Caribbean sky lit up like dawn, a billion-dollar empire reduced to molten steel and smoke. The cartel soldiers, now handcuffed and shivering on the deck of the RHIB, stared at the hell that had been their fortress. For them, the war was over. For America, it was another message: not only would the drugs be seized, but the networks that carried them would be burned to the water's edge. By dawn, the Caribbean was quiet again. Smoke from the cartel ship still curled above the waves, a dark scar against the rising sun. The operation had ended in victory, but its numbers told a story far larger than one battle: 40 tons of narcotics seized, over $7 billion in street value erased, 5 hostages rescued from chains, 30 cartel gunmen captured, dozens more killed or wounded. For the United States Navy, it was a flawless strike. For the cartels, it was devastation. Yet the meaning stretched beyond the tally of drugs and bodies. Intelligence recovered on hard drives and phones revealed chilling connections, bank transfers totaling more than $50 million, shell companies in Panama and Curaçao, encrypted correspondence with contacts in Europe, even whispers of weapon shipments flowing in the opposite direction. Tren de Aragua and the Sinaloa cartel were not simply trafficking drugs, they were weaving an international network designed to bleed America's streets and destabilize its allies. Analysts in Washington put it plainly: had this shipment reached U.S. soil, it could have triggered a wave of overdoses measured not in hundreds, but in tens of thousands. 1 ton of fentanyl alone can produce over 450 million lethal doses. This ship carried 10 times that amount. The devastation would have been biblical. And so the message was delivered, not just to Tren de Aragua or to Sinaloa, but to every criminal syndicate that believes the ocean is their shield. Attack America's borders with poison, and the response will not be symbolic. It will be decisive. It will come at sea, in the air, and if necessary, to the very strongholds where these empires are built. But the warning carries a darker question. If 2 cartels acting alone could marshal this much firepower and narcotics, what happens when a hostile state bankrolls them with 10 times the resources? What happens when the next merchant ship carries not just drugs, but missiles or explosives? The oceans are watching. America cannot afford to blink. The night of September 27, 2025, will not be forgotten. What began as a secret meeting between 2 of the world's most ruthless cartels ended in flames, shattered steel, and chains on the wrists of their soldiers. The Tren de Aragua syndicate, born in Venezuela's prisons, and the Sinaloa cartel, Mexico's narco giant, believed the sea would hide them. Instead, the sea became their grave. The statistics are staggering: 40 tons of narcotics destroyed, 10 tons of fentanyl, 15 tons of meth, 15 tons of cocaine, a street value exceeding $7 billion. 5 innocent hostages saved from a fate worse than death. 30 cartel fighters captured alive, dozens more killed or wounded, and a criminal alliance that had operated in shadows for years, exposed before the world. These are not just numbers, they are lives spared, communities protected, futures reclaimed. But victory is only half the story. Intelligence seized in the operation proved that these cartels are no longer isolated criminals, they are global players, laundering millions through banks, buying weapons on black markets, and plotting routes that cross oceans and continents.